Welcome to Strata. I'm Glenn.
And I'm Brandon. Welcome to the Minds on Muscle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Minds on Muscle podcast. My name is Glenn, and this is my co-host,
Brandon. I'm Brandon.
Brandon Green. And today we're talking about barbells. Barbells, Brandon. Do we need them, Brandon?
I think it's an interesting conversation. I'm really excited about this one. I'm a barbell head by nature. I got into this whole exercise land from deadlifts and squats and bench presses and cleans and jerks. And over the last several years, as Glenn and I and many of us are learning more about exercise science and forces in the body, come to some interesting fruitions that maybe this idea of a barbell being the only tool you'll need as an exercise system is not true. And maybe there are some better options if we study the mechanics a little bit.
Yes, I agree. There's an excellent quote, and I think you actually know it better than I do. You have it tattooed on your body. What does it say?
I have tattooed on my forearm. It is historical continuity that maintains most assumptions, not a repeated assessment of their validity. Barbells are one of those things.
Yes.
That people have been using them for decades. Their favorite exercise people have been using them for decades. Therefore, there is this providence that has carried through all the way till now where people absolutely love barbells. And I get it. I love them too. In fact, if we had more space here, I'd probably collect them because I'm a big nerd like that. I love barbells. But that love can't be overruled with my bias. I got to be focusing on mechanics, and that's what we're going to talk about today is the mechanics of some of these exercises and potentially some other options that are out there.
It's funny. So when I woke up this morning and we read the show notes and we went over them, you would suggest let's look at the big three. And the big three, for anyone who's not familiar, even though you likely are the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. And when you look at all three of these exercises, all barbell exercises, when you look at how the strength curve might match the force profile of your body. Did I say that correctly? I feel like I may have.
Strength curve, resistance curve.
I'm sorry, resistance curve the strength curve. Wow. Brandon, would you take over? I'm just having a hard time articulating this one here.
So with the barbell exercises and most free weight exercises, there's this combination of thing that we've talked about, and you can definitely find an episode that we've talked about in the past, comparing this thing called a strength curve and a resistance curve. And the resistance curve, we could also call a magnitude profile, if you will, as well. So the human body, based off its mechanics and how you move through gravity and how far away your joints are from center of mass, will kind of tell you, well, how good is this body at contracting in this position because of mechanics, the lengths of these muscles, if my muscles are in a really shortened position, mid-range position, long position, the direction of force, all that stuff matters. So that summation of that is the strength profile or strength curve. And then the resistance curve is how that exercise, how the resistance changes or the force. I think that's what you're saying that, right? The force of the exercise, which is expressed as torque and or resistance, how that changes through the exercise. So if you're doing something like a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, or generally speaking, most free weight, big compound exercises, the force of the exercise, the resistance, is going to be much, much higher in the bottom position of the exercise. With these three, the deadlift, the squat, the bench press, it's the bottom position. From a force generating perspective inside your body, the strength curve perspective, your ability to produce force is absolutely less at the bottom than it is at the top. When you're at the top, you're standing completely straight and you're holding onto that barbell on your shoulders, in your hands, and it's going through all of your joints. You have a lot of mechanical efficiency to maintain that position. But as your elbows bend for the bench press, as your knees separate from your hips as you go down for a squat or a deadlift, or you bend over more, the distance from your joints gets way further from your center of mass. The resistance of the exercise also picks up some distance from those joints. Therefore, it gets heavier. That's cool. But in powerlifting, you got to think about powerlifting, those people who pick up tons of pounds of weight. You're talking about thousands of pounds of deadlift, maybe not thousands, 1,000-pound deadlift, 1,000-pound squat, hundreds of pound bench press. Powerlifting in many of these sports are really how well can you control the bottom? And once you get out of the bottom, it's not smooth sailing, but it really is. Can you start off in the crummiest position? And how do you do through the rest of that excursion?
And yet these are some of the most favorite exercises of exercisers everywhere. And it's almost like these are the ones that you're always going to start with if you are getting started on your exercise and health journey.
If you're a carpenter, if you guys have ever had a carpenter to your house and they come over and they've got like a bag of hammers, tons of different hammers. You look in there, there's like small ones, big ones. And you're like, well, I'm going to do some work around my own house. I can fix up some of these things. I just need one hammer. I can make it all work with one hammer. And many of you, and including myself, if you're not a carpenter and you're not someone who's doing finish carpeting and all these fancier forms of carpentry, you can probably get away with one hammer for hanging up pictures, doing some trim and whatnot. But each hammer, each size, each shape has totally different effects on how it produces force, the type of nails that you can hit, how efficiently the hammer is helping you put the nail in, or how much force you have to generate. It's completely different. And this is the challenge, and this is one of the very interesting things. I love barbells. I love barbells. I think it's a lot of fun. And in fact, there's a couple here that I'm just a huge fan of. But are we trying to fit, as you've said, square peg in a round hole? Are we trying to take something that we love and we use a lot of and make this whole body move totally different to work around that thing? And unfortunately, I think this is one of the things that we do, especially in powerlifting, bodybuilding, Olympic lifting, CrossFitting land. We take one implement and we make our body work around it. Now, here's the really cool thing about it. The creativity that we've had to come up with to make this barbell work for so many exercises. I mean, that's an incredible exercise. There are so many barbell exercises, we literally could not name them all because we would probably name 1,000, and there's probably a few more that were just created yesterday. But do they make the most sense for the body?
And the short answer is usually no. Usually not. I mean, they're inefficient, to say the least. It doesn't mean you can't get some great results with them. Hell, there are people that train with just barbells and they either get really big or they get really strong, but are they getting there as efficient as they can? And the answer is often no. And we've spoken about it in other times before, other podcasts before, is that machines are often like the thinking man's barbell, right? These machines, if they're well designed, actually get you where you want to go quicker, faster, more efficiently in less time. And so it's great to use barbells. There's nothing wrong with them. They're a tool like anything else, but there are probably better ways to get to where you want to go, wherever that is for you.
Exercise machines are a great option and a great conversation topic with this, because barbells, again, I mean, if you're listening to this, I want to say this very openly. Glenn and I love barbells. When we work out, we do use them too, but we all have to recognize that it is a straight long beam, and you have to modify your joint positions in so many ways to make this thing work. In some ways, it's very insidious and you may not even be aware of it. If you're a very mobile person, you might not even notice it. Machines create a really interesting juxtaposition, because you can literally, and it depends on the machine, if it's a free motion machine, a single plane machine, or if it's got two, you can just shove. And it depends on your goal. That's definitely the captain of the ship. Depends on the goal that you're trying to get from this exercise and who you are. Because if you don't have the requirements for one of these machines, you can't use it. Or if you're trying to work on functional training, so to speak, machines might not be in your wheelhouse, depending on how you define functional. Conversation for another day. But I know many, many very knowledgeable bodybuilders, big, strong people that have completely stepped away from using barbells within their free weight workouts. They're still doing free weight workouts, which is where I'd like to kind of drive this. Is let's talk about how we can use free weights and how we could potentially use already existing implements that are available to you at most gyms, or you can order. There's these amazing specialty barbells I'd love to kind of like talk about the mechanics of them. And it's funny because they call them specialty barbells. Mm-hmm. Like you do the barbell bench press and then you use these special barbells as kind of like an auxiliary exercise. I'd like to frame that these auxiliary exercises that are available out there could be primary exercises.
I'm curious. You said that some of these bodybuilders have stepped away from using barbells, but they're still doing free weight exercises. Is that what you said?
I did.
So what are you saying? They're using dumbbells? Or are you saying they're using these specialty bars, a combination of those two? Because what is a dumbbell if not a little handheld barbell?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
So yes, I would say a dumbbell is a mini barbell, but that's not what we're going to talk about with this. And so that could come up. Well, that's not the direction I'm going to go with this. To answer your question. So frankly, one thing that I've started to explore personally, which has been a really interesting adventure, is barbell back squats are very popular exercises. If you are on Instagram, YouTube, you're doing any research on exercise and you look up best exercise for growing glutes, bigger legs, growth hormone increasing, whether or not these are true or not, you can look up squats. conversation for another day.
Another day.
Right? And you can find barbell squats, and specifically lots of barbell variations, high barbell back squats, low barbell back squats, front squats, hack squats, goblet squats, Zercher squats. Like all these are different variations of placing barbells on your body to squat. Again, many of them, for example, like the barbell back squat, you put the bar across your back, right? When you do that, you have to put this huge bar on the top of your neck. That's totally fine. Most necks and traps are pretty strong. And if you've progressed it adequately, sure, you can tolerate it. Some people can't, but that's another conversation. From there, you have to take your hands and you have to go into full external rotation and abduction to get your hands behind the bar to grab it. Now, for many people, when you go back into full scapular retraction, horizontal abduction, external rotation, maybe in shoulder flexion a little bit, depending on how you're defining it, but you're all the way back here and you have to grab that bar, you're in a very extreme joint position. You're getting close in your shoulder, something called a closed packed position. It's funny when you're talking about a barbell back squat, not too many people are talking about what's going on in the shoulders and the upper body. You're really talking about the feet nowadays. We even talked about squats, the feet, dorsiflexion, knees, hips, low backs, primary areas. No one's talking about what's going on upstairs. In most cases, a barbell back squat, many people are using it to try and grow muscle or get stronger, which is a very cool thing to do because it makes you really have to gain ownership over the bottom. But why would you want to choose an exercise that's all about choosing a high amount of force production? You want to be as strong as possible. And part of that exercise takes some joints, for example, upper extremity parts that we don't talk about, and puts them completely into an extreme position. We've talked about length tension relationships, your scapular retractors, many of the muscles on the back of your shoulder, rear delts, if you want to start naming small muscles, they're in very shortened positions. And on the strength curve perspective, they're at a very short position. They can't produce as much force. Since they can't produce as much force, they're going to be a little less strong. And if you have to call on them at all to help you with the squat, they're not going to be able to perform. So is it possible that you'll be able to produce more force if you could get out of that shoulder position?
I would say so, yeah. And is there not, if I'm not mistaken, they do make specialty squat bars where instead of having to have your hands all the way back and grab the barbell, you can actually, I think they're called safety squat bars, have the hands, I guess, in front of your body by your chest.
Yes,
right?
They do. And we've got one here, the squat assist bar. And so that's what's really neat is you can take that exact same barbell, you can put it across your neck, but it puts the hands out in front and it keeps your shoulders and arms in a relatively neutral position. There are some specialty bars, which I can't remember which company it's from. I think it's from Sornex. It actually allows you to manipulate where the resistance is sitting. So if you want to feel like a back squat or a front squat, you can have that weight shifted more into the front, more into the back, but the hand position stays in a pretty sturdy position. So from getting more muscle, for having more control, but keeping your joints in a sturdier position, you can really do an amazing job of controlling all those positions, which is great, really great. And I love that because if you keep your shoulders in a neutral position, you can produce more force, keep everything happy, and maybe get more of that exercise without causing too many issues.
Well, I'm for myself more concerned about just keeping everything happy at this point. And I think a lot of people who are exercising, especially once you hit the age of 35, I'm edging up there in like 2 months. And my concern now for myself is feeling good. And a lot of times the old Albert Einstein quote is, doing the same things over and over and expecting different results is the definition of crazy, so to speak. And oftentimes what got you to where you are isn't going to be the thing that helps you get to where you ought to go next. And although we don't think about it very often, if you are back squatting over and over and over again and putting your arms and shoulders in that hugely externally rotated position, grabbing that bar over time, especially if you're doing it like week after week, that's some serious wear and tear on that joint. And what if that shoulder discomfort that you're experiencing could be alleviated just by switching barbells? You can still do the thing that you want to do, but instead of having to jump through all these different hoops and seeing different health practitioners week after week trying to figure out what you ought to do, you just stop putting your body in that position that it just doesn't like. Who knows how that might alleviate that discomfort? We've talked about it on previous podcasts, just trying to force your body to hold certain positions when you exercise. Like we talked about a dumbbell lateral raise, how people often want to keep their shoulder blades pulled down during that movement, and they do their lateral raise, and then different parts of the shoulder end up getting pinched inside where the humerus and the acromion meet each other, and that causes them pain and discomfort. And wow, what happens when you start letting your body flow freely through positions it wants to be in, how that discomfort goes away? What if you stop forcing your body to be in positions it doesn't want to be in? What would that change? We could see the same thing for your hips, knees, and your ankles. Often when people are doing barbell exercises, they're not just going down as far as their active range of motion will allow. They're following these these rules of exercise, which is like ass to grass or butt all the way down. And that weight forces them to go past what they can control for ankle dorsiflexion or for a knee flexion or for hip flexion. And all these tissues getting beat up. What if we went to the safety squat bar and we started working within a range of motion that our body likes? We could still get the same results or better and actually have those joints not feel icky anymore.
Yeah, we got to stay away from that hyper cueing for sure, because that's something that's become really popular. People learning more about mechanics.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, and this is what I like about talking about things like the squat assist bar. Now, frankly, I don't think I'll ever put a barbell across my back again, because mechanically, although I really like to challenge myself and I like trying to grow muscle, I like trying to get stronger, I have some squat goals that I want to do, but I don't think having a straight bar across my back is going to help. And it's not going to help me reach those goals. And I do think it increases the risk. One of the most common areas that people hurt themselves with a squat, from a very quick Cole's notes, is their low back. A lot of folks will squat. And like Glenn was saying, if you go down and you do a squat and you go too deep, you violate dorsiflexion, or how much knee flexion you have or how much hip flexion you have, it could transfer into your low back, and you do the butt wink and all the things that people talk about.
Yeah.
What if your shoulder position being in a neutral position actually helped this? Because when you have your hands behind your back and you bring your shoulder blades all the way back, it shoves you into thoracic extension and then a little bit of lumbar extension, which is fine. It's a great thing to do. But as you start going down, if you've got the upper body shoved into a completely shortened position of a lot of upper back muscle, so your thoracic musculature is a little bit weaker, then your low back's in that same position, your lumbar spine. But as you go down the squat, your lower back, all it's relying on is those small erectors in the back to produce force, because you've jammed past what your hip extensors can do into hip flexion. Now your lower back can't even call on your upper back. So it's redundancy muscles, the same muscles, if you will, because many of these lumbar and thoracic muscles are literally just one large muscle, if you want to think of it that way. We just delineate them based off of where their spinal segment is. It can't rely on those upper back muscles because they're in a shortened position. And so for me, a squat assist bar is a much more logical option to free weight exercise, because it keeps many of your upper extremity muscles in a more neutral position. It doesn't shove you too far forward. You've got a lot more control. And if you are challenging yourself at a higher level and you're trying to do your, RPE of 9 or 10, whatever it may be, many of those upper back muscles may be able to produce some force to help support your lower back, which I think is kind of cool.
And that is just from changing the hand position on the bar. Shoulder position on the bar.
Yeah.
That's it. And there's other things we can manipulate as well. Like we could add bands, right? Or you've seen some people add chains before. I'm not a huge fan of chains. I think it adds a little bit of like a wobbly instability factor. But some people do use bands to help offload that weight in the bottom position to make the entire exercise a little bit more matching those two profiles that we talked about, right? To make the strength profile match the profile of the exercise, right? Of how it's going to apply the force to your body. There's all these other different things that we can do to make this exercise work better for you and make your body feel good while you're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I like about the squat assist bar with the bands at the bottom offloading you is you end up kind of having 3 layers of assistance, which I think I've talked about in a previous episode. First, you have the first layer of assistance where many of your upper back muscles are in a more neutral position, if you will. I shouldn't say neutral, but they're not in a fully shortened position. So you have a bit more upper back stability or contractile ability. Second, you have the bands making it a little bit lighter at the bottom. So you have this high amount of torque. There's a little bit decreased resistance in the low back, which is also great, decreased risk of injury. But at the same time, there's still a lot of force down there if you're going to the bottom position, and it's a max amount of resistance you can produce down there. So what helps is you do get a layer of stability, and you do have the bands that are kind of supporting you from one side to the other. So it's not just your 2 feet managing the weight. You do have this kind of these extra 2 support systems, 2 extra legs of bands, if you will, helping support that. So it makes it a bit sturdier. So yeah, if you guys want to learn more about that, we did a resistance curve and strength curve conversation. And if you want to talk about more how you can take your free weight exercises, any exercise really, and kind of manipulate them and what the heck we're even talking about there, check that out, because there's some really cool stuff in there.
Absolutely. And Brandon, we've talked a lot about squatting right now. Perhaps we can move on to the deadlift.
Ooh,
Now, I think it might have even been less than a month ago, we had discussed the deadlift, and you were discussing how it's an illogical exercise. Now, I don't know if you want to go on that tangent again. I thought it was fantastic information for people that didn't hear that podcast. I think it'd be great for them to hear. Would you mind sharing why you think the deadlift is an illogical exercise?
Well, I would say this. From most folks' perspectives, if you're trying to use the deadlift as a performance exercise, a strength exercise, or a hypertrophy exercise, I do think, I'm a deadlifter, so I like deadlifting. And I do use barbell deadlift from time to time, but not all the time. It is an illogical exercise in that, in my opinion, the risks do outweigh the benefits, if not designed properly. So you've got a couple things that are happening. You have this barbell that's in front of you with a formidable amount of resistance. And if you've got enough resistance that your body can't shove it forward as your knee goes forward, it's going to shove your hips back because you do have this bar coming straight down and it's forcing you. You can't have your knees bend forward like you do in a squat. So it shoves your hips and your low back and everything behind the bar. And then it goes down all the way to the ground and it pulls you down into a fully hip flex position. Much like with the squat and like we talked about with previous exercises, there's a lot of resistance at the bottom, a lot of torque because you got a lot of distance from joints and you have that weight, especially from your hips and low back, as far away from those joint systems as possible. So the reason why I would say it's illogical, more so than even the squat, is it really forces your body mechanics to get shoved around this barbell unless you're doing a light enough weight. But if you're there at light enough weight, then you're starting to manipulate how the resistance is being expressed on you. And is it going to meet the goals of getting your hip extensors low back? So we can talk more about that. But ultimately, coming back to all three of those goals I just mentioned, performance, strength, hypertrophy. For most folks, if that's a goal that you have, why not eliminate the risks and try to make it a little bit nicer for your body so you can get more out of it? Respect your active range of motion. The other big thing that people do with deadlifts, there's so many variations, is that they have the bar go with 45-pound size plates on each side all the way down to the ground. And talking about that active range of motion, if you've got way longer upper arms, your body's going to be able to touch the ground a lot easier than if you got short little arms. You got short little legs, you're going to get down to the ground much easier. So your proportions do matter. If you're 6'4" with long legs and arms, it's going to feel totally different than Glenn and I doing that same exercise, or my wife who's even shorter than us, because you don't have to travel as far. Our joints can fold up a little bit better. So we can talk about assessing active range of motion. We've done in previous episodes, try to figure out how much motion you require specifically to your body to do this exercise. But this is where, and you'll heard me talk about this multiple times, and maybe I can let Glenn talk about it this time. I'm a big fan of the Prime Trap Bar.
Yeah, the Prime Trap Bar is an amazing piece of equipment, and I love it because it has the ability to customize a whole bunch of different things on there. I think the coolest one is that you can actually determine how high you want the handles to come up away from the bar, which means that if you're not someone that has a lot of hip flexion range of motion, you can't bend all the way over, or you just don't want to be coming down that low to begin with, you can actually raise the handles up off the bar and shorten up your range of motion to meet whatever is going to suit your body and your needs. In addition to that, and this might be my favorite feature, is you can actually load the bar in a different position than a typical barbell. So you can actually turn the barbell on its side, and it's got these little stands that raise the inserts high enough off the ground. I think that was the right English. High up enough so you can actually put the 45-pound plates on without having to pull up the barbell, shove the weights on, put it down again, pull up the barbell, shove the weights on, put it down again. It actually takes a lot of that time that you'd spend fussing about putting weights on and off and actually just beating up those muscles that you want to use for the exercise. It just alleviates all of that. So you can just get right down to business and get after it when you're fresh and respect your joint positions. I mean, those are my favorite things about that trap bar. There's also adjustable handles as well in terms of different handle variations. So typical barbells have just one hand position, which is going to be on the barbell. These ones actually meet your, if I'm not mistaken, they actually meet your hands, so you can actually have it down at your sides, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yep. So instead of having to force that weight out in front of your body, you can actually have your hands at your sides and change the distance that barbell is going to be from your center of mass. So what this allows you to do is actually manipulate how your body's going to be experiencing that weight. If you want to load up your low back and your hips a little bit less and take a little bit less torque off those areas because you're concerned about injuring yourself or hurting yourself, you can do that with this barbell. So many different ways to customize it. Did I miss any there, Brandon?
Well, so to the part you were just talking about, like
Yeah.
manipulating, I mean, that's what it's a big U-shaped barbell. And there's many trap bars that are like this. The Prime trap bar is only the one that allows, well, it's the only one that I'm aware of that has the telescoping handles like Glenn alluded to and the switchable grips. So a couple things. So to Glenn's point, we were talking about the grips changing. So most barbells, you have either a fully supinated and a fully pronated grip, or you have two pronated grips. My computer just dinged. I hope that wasn't too loud for everybody listening. So I'm going to just click this here. So there's a fully pronated grip and a fully supinated grip, or either two fully pronated grips, which is totally fine. But both of those are extremes of joint position. So you have one fully supinated, one fully pronated. And if that's the case, your ability to produce force in those positions is going to be decreased a little bit. So again, coming back to optimally setting things up, if you can have your arms in a fully neutral position, so your palms are facing one another, that's what these trap bars do, which is really great. Now, the nice thing that I love about this trap bar specifically is it does have handles that are removable and you can switch them. So you got bigger hands, smaller hands, or you don't have the strongest grip and you can't use your thumb super well, you can use the rotate handles, the regular knurled handles, or even wider ones called the Kaz handles from Prime. That's really, really neat. So that also helps to protect your shoulder and upper extremities. So it's fun. But since it's a U shape, like Glenn was saying, you can really manipulate your body position to make it way more hip extension focus, way more lower back, way more knee focus. It can become a squatting exercise. It's really cool. So it's not just an endorsement for Prime trap bars, but doing deadlift style exercises in a trap bar scenario is great. But the Prime one allows you to check your active range of motion to manipulate things so you can actually not go as deep or go even deeper based off of what your body allows.
Yeah, if you've noticed a trend at all in our podcast, that we love the fact that with the right information and understanding and the right tools, you can manipulate most anything to make sense for your body. And that's why we love all this equipment so much, and discussing things like the safety bar and the U-shaped bar from Strive is because it allows you to manipulate all these different variables that you might not be able to manipulate with traditional barbells, making things safer and more effective for you. Now, I don't know if I'm correct on this one or not, but we don't have any fancy barbells for bench pressing, do we?
Not yet, but I promise it's coming.
Yeah, is there one from Strive? No, is there one from Strive that is fancy for bench pressing?
No, there's not one from Prime right yet. But there's some things that I'm sure that, I mean, right now, especially these specialty bars and the stuff that Glenn and I are talking about, it's becoming more prevalent that unique bar designs and changing things to accommodate grip and position really go a long way. And so there are a lot of companies that are working on specialty bars for bench pressing. Now, right now, for example, companies like Rogue and other powerlifting companies have a type of barbell called the Swiss bar. So barbell bench press, by far, probably the most popular exercise ever, because most people who are not even knowledgeable about exercise go to the gym and they do crunches and bench press, or crunches and push-ups. But they go to the straight bar, they grab the bar, and they do bench press. Bench press is a great exercise, but one of the challenges that pops up with the grip that I think is probably the biggest challenge with it is that since you're grabbing that straight bar, you have to go to a fully pronated position. And because you have this bar, you have to have your wrist either shove in to line up with the bar, so the groove from your palm, from the pinky side to your thumb side lines up, or people do this suicide grip where their thumb's wrapped around the bar. There's a lot of pressure going down through the wrist. These are all fine options if you have the active range of motion. But like myself and Chris here, we used to really work at it. Like we were doing at 1.3 plates on the bench press, and we were putting way too much force on the back of our wrists. And I even now, both from playing drums aggressively and from doing those bench presses, have these little cysts in the back of my wrist because I was doing too much weight in a position I didn't have ownership over. For sure, a big mistake, but I can now still bench press and have no problem. The Swiss bar, most Swiss bars have a variation of different grips. So kind of like we were talking about with the deadlift, you can go to that neutral grip. And what's nice about that neutral grip, which is not the same when you have a fully pronated grip on the bar, is when you fully pronate and grab the bar, it does manipulate your shoulder position, and tends for a lot of people who do get shoulder injuries, shove them out to like this 90-degree position, and they're going shoved back all the way into horizontal abduction, which can create unpleasant stress in the front of the shoulder. So again, on the performance side of it, and we will have one here soon. Kobe's just kind of messed with a couple of the plans on that scenario, is if you could have a nicer neutral grip, or you could even just use dumbbells. This allows for a much more natural motion of your shoulder, allow you to focus on chest mechanics and shoulder mechanics a little bit more naturally and not force anything to the wrist, which I think is really kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, the forcing of anything is usually no bueno. And isn't it funny how you could do something as simple as just switch out the barbell and use dumbbells instead to help work with your anatomy, and how much that'll just change the way you feel in the exercise? I haven't seen a Swiss bar. Are they shaped in a certain way?
There's kind of two general designs. There's one that's kind of like more of a square shape where it's got a variety of grips shaped with the bars at different angles. So you have like completely parallel bars, and then they'll kind of incrementally work out by 15 degrees until you get closer to a straight bar.
Okay.
But they won't, because it would twist. And then the other one, instead of being more of a rectangle, is a regular bar with kind of like little diamond shapes where it's got a couple grips inside there as well. Yeah. So ideally, what would be a great version of that bar, instead of having those fixed positions, is you could have a bar that you could slide the handles in and out and rotate them to different positions and switch the grips out, similar to the trap bar. But we'll have to see if something like that comes out. But that's the idea, is that a regular barbell has limitations. And the thing is, if you want to make your entire exercise regime around this very limited system, that's fine. It comes back to one of the things that Glenn and I talk about often. Exercise really doesn't exist. There are just force scenarios placed on the body, and our joints have prerequisite positions, and our muscles can do certain amount of contractile. It can go to certain lengthened positions and certain shortened positions, and each one of us are so different. Barbells for some of you may be perfect, but could you be limiting your results, limiting your opportunity? And maybe there's some amazing stuff that you could experience by just changing how you're doing things a little bit to get more out of these exercises. And honestly, I do think so.
And the one thing I will add on to all that is, I think a lot of people, because they experience these increasingly crazy challenges in some of these unfavorable positions, like the bottom of a squat, the bottom of a deadlift, and the bottom of a bench press, they associate that sensation of having to work really hard in that moment with this exercise being very effective, and the inherent instability of a barbell and having to manage different things as being more effective and challenging. The truth is that you can get very similar inputs and increases in strength and muscle hypertrophy and size by using machines, or by doing things a little bit differently and a little bit smarter. And there's no reason you necessarily need to use a barbell to get to these places. And I think that's a place that people usually confuse themselves, or maybe just don't know, or have a bias towards it because it's more challenging. But just know that if you choose these different ways of doing things, like machines or some of these smart barbells, so to speak, just because they don't necessarily feel the same doesn't mean that you aren't getting the same challenge or the same bang for your buck. In fact, you're probably going to get more, even if it's not feeling as challenging in the moment.
I mean, a perfect example with that is a deadlift. For most people who do a barbell deadlift for the first time versus a trap bar deadlift, even if they're going the same depth, you'll be able to move more physical weight with a barbell deadlift, because when you do it, you have a bunch of your body weight going behind the barbell to actually help kind of counter or lift that up, kind of like a weird teeter-totter. While with a trap bar, you don't. It's going straight down through your feet. So it's very different. You don't have the same assistance that you get from a barbell that you do get with a trap bar. But what's interesting about that is that the trap bar means you're not transferring any of that energy to physics. You are, but different. It's going all into your muscles, and your skeletal system is producing all of that force. So although you may be doing less weight, the amount of resistance that your body is experiencing through your skeletal muscle system may be the same. And I think that's really cool. Really cool. I think it's a neat thing.
Yeah. And when you're stressing out things that you ought not be stressing out, like when you get into that shoulder position, right? When you feel that up here, that's probably not what the exercise is supposed to be doing. Yet we go ahead and do it anyways. I had a client who we were doing some back squatting with, and he was stopping short of what I know he could do. And he was saying, well, the trainer before me told me I was supposed to pull my shoulder blades back and keep them there as hard as I could and hold it there the entire time. And so my legs can keep going, but I feel like the bar is going to start falling off and I'm like, okay, well, let's just not try to hold that as hard as you can. Let's just try to hold the barbell on your back and just keep it secure. They're not trying to max anything out. And it made a huge difference, right? And now this guy does have the controllable range of motion to get there, and he does like doing the exercise, so we do it. But we got to be thinking about these things. Like, we really have to start being more critical. Exercise is not just something where, okay, it's back squat day, let's do back squat. We have to start being more mindful of these things, because this is how we get to where we want to go optimally, and also have longevity. Longevity is the key here.
And to what Glenn's saying, I mean, and I think, you said one thing, and I, slightly, I'm not sure. You said, when it's uncomfortable and you shouldn't be doing it, but I don't know if everyone does.
That's fair.
And I would say this is that next time you set up your next exercise, you go to anything, a bicep curl with a free weight or into a machine, grab everything, kind of just pull on it with 5% effort and just see, is this comfortable on my body? Does this feel comfortable? And just take that quick second to mentally assess subjectively, do you like how that feels at all those joints? Because if you grab something and you're like, my wrist feels a little weird when I load it like this, could you change it so you don't feel it? Most of us, I find, are so excited to be exercising. If you're in a yoga class, Pilates, barbell, it doesn't matter what platform, you're excited to be there. There's a community, you have a challenge, you're trying to reach the subjective, and that's fantastic. But all I would say, don't think about it to the same level of detail that Glenn and I are talking about. You don't need to. But what you do need to do, go into the scenario, load yourself even for one Mississippi, and then ask yourself quickly, did everything feel good? Do I like how that feels? And if you like how it felt, give her. If you didn't like how it felt, make a change, because those small little pokes and aches, and the one that you feel on the right side but not on the left, usually lead towards something. If you can identify those now, it'll make you more aware for things in the future and ultimately help preserve your joints a little better.
Fantastic. Brandon, that was a wonderful piece of advice. So do you have anything else you want to add?
I was just thinking that I want to know what your pick of the week is.
My pick of the week. That's a great question. My pick of the week is StreamYard. I've been playing around with a new platform called StreamYard, and StreamYard is essentially a online tool that you can use as a way to push out content to all your other platforms. So I haven't used it to create anything to push out to all these other platforms yet, but I have a StreamYard account, and what I do is I will record whatever I want to in terms of like video and audio. Could be a podcast or it could be a little segment I'm working on. My girlfriend and I are looking to foster a dog in the next couple of weeks, and we're looking to create some content about like our experience to share with other people. And StreamYard is a great way for me to record it and then send it right out to YouTube and then to Twitch and then also to Facebook and any other platforms that I want to all at one time. You can create banners, you can create your own user interfaces. You can do a whole bunch of really cool stuff with it. And it's very easy to use, very intuitive for the layperson like me that doesn't want to have, control over every little thing. Right? Like Brandon's really great. Like this podcast setup, you'll notice is a new setup, and Brandon has spent at least an hour trying to figure out every small little detail to make it as awesome as possible. And I'm super appreciative because I don't want to do that, but I know that he loves to do that. So I'm really happy about it. StreamYard just allows me to plug everything in and go. It's simple. It makes everything look crisp. I'm pretty happy about it. Highly recommend StreamYard if you're a content creator and you're looking to push things out to multiple platforms for ease of use. So my pick of the week is StreamYard. Brandon, pick of the week.
Well, my pick of the week's on the desk, and Glenn doesn't even know that it's here. So I'll tell you really quickly. So I did this Kickstarter right before COVID started in January. There was this little piece of technology that came out. Nope, that's not it. There's this Kickstarter for this really cool thing. And one thing that's become a lot more popular in the last little while, if you guys have listened to previous podcasts, I'm a bit of a tech nerd. I like techie things, but techie things that make my life more efficient and more useful. So there's this company called Sum, and I believe they spell it with a plus sign in front. If you're looking at the brand, it's plus sign SUM. And they released this new product called the Drop in Dock. And so what it is, if you're watching this later, is this wonderful thing right here. And so what it is, it's actually a wireless charger, but it's a wireless charger.
What?
So this little thing I'm holding in my hand, it's just a black hockey puck looking thing. And over on my computer desk, there's a receiver. So I have that sitting on my desk, and I put this on top of it, and it charges. And the actual wireless charger creates this remote coaster that allows me to charge my phone pretty much anywhere that I want to. So that way.
How does this work?
So if you guys are interested, now I will say it's not cheap because I got it at the Kickstarter. It was like $50, but I think it's gone up to maybe $100 and something now. But what it is over on my desk, I've got this little wireless platform, and it is the charging base for this.
Okay.
And so this hockey puck that I'm holding in my hand sits on top of it, and either that hockey puck will get charged and will charge through a regular USB or USB-C cable. And then the actual hockey puck piece charges itself, and it's removable. And like I'm doing right now, I can actually have my phone charging while I'm on this podcast, sitting here without any plugins or anything like that. So I was really excited about it. To be honest, if it wasn't COVID, I probably wouldn't have spent that little bit of money on it, but it was January and I wasn't worried about where things were. But I think it's a really nifty thing. So it's coming up to Christmas time. If you're looking for a techie gadget for that techie person in your world, it is not the cheapest wireless charger, but I will say for someone who's moving around the facility and I require power at Strata at all times on my phone. And if it's dying, not super great, but right now I've had a busy day. I've been charging it while we've been on the podcast and I'm at 96%. And it's great. So I would definitely say it's called the Sum Drop and Dock. Now they make much less expensive charging systems, but as far as a portable wireless charger, it's pretty cool and cosmetically doesn't look that bad.
I thought this was some Nikola Tesla free energy stuff you're talking about. They're like, it was sending the energy through the air. Like I thought we finally broke through, but I understand now. It charges on its own port and then you can bring it and charge it wherever you want.
That's right.
That's why I was so blown away to begin with. I was like, oh, somebody finally did it. Well, everybody, this has been another delicious edition of the Minds on Muscle podcast. You can find this podcast in a plethora of different places. We've got our new beautiful setups. You can find this on YouTube. We're also on our hosting platform, Podbean, which streams out to both iTunes and Spotify. Brandon, brick and mortar, tell them where we're at.
Listen, this is a Strata podcast, and we're at Strata Internal Performance in Newmarket, Ontario. We're at 17705. Leslie, you want to check us out anytime outside of COVID, even right now, just send us a quick message. We'd love to show you the spot. We got some really cool machines, big spot, and an awesome team of exercise professionals focusing on your body, like we talked about with this podcast today, to help you move better, feel better, and ultimately exercise pain-free.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a beautiful and wonderful day.
And please give us 5-star ratings.
Yes, 5 stars.